The glass shattered against the marble floor of the penthouse office. Adrian Cole didn't flinch. He stared at the divorce papers spread across his desk, the ink 6 months dry, the signature still burning into his memory like a brand. Outside, snow fell over Manhattan's skyline, silent and indifferent, just like the empty space where his wedding ring used to be. His phone rang. Adrian ignored it. He ignored everything these days: board meetings that didn't matter, women who wanted his name more than his heart, the hollow echo of footsteps in a home built for two. The phone kept ringing. Something in its persistence made him reach for it. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, calm but urgent. "This is Dr. Ava Lynn from Willow Haven Medical Center. I'm calling regarding Elena Rivera." The name hit him like a fist to the chest. Elena. His ex-wife. The woman who'd walked out of his life with nothing but accusations and tears, leaving him to piece together a reality that made no sense. He hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in months. Now it sat in the air between him and this stranger, heavy with implications he couldn't yet grasp. "What about her?" His voice came out harder than he intended. "She listed you as the father of her newborn daughter. The baby was born 3 hours ago. There were complications, but both are stable now. We need you to come to the hospital, Mr. Cole. She asked for you." The world stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The snow outside froze mid-fall. The city held its breath. Adrian's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. "That's impossible," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, something was shifting in his chest. Some door he'd welded shut was beginning to crack. "We've been divorced for 6 months. She left me. She. Mr. Cole, I understand this is difficult, but the baby is yours. Elena was very clear about that. She needs you here." He hung up. Not because he didn't believe her. Because he did. And that belief was a knife twisting in his gut, carving out every assumption he'd built his survival on. Elena had left him because of a photograph, him and Victoria Chen, his business partner, caught in what looked like an intimate moment at a hotel. It had been a setup, a calculated move by Marcus Reeves, a rival investor who wanted to tank Cole Industries' merger. By the time Adrian had proven it, by the time Mason had traced the fake metadata and the paid photographer, Elena was gone. Her phone disconnected. Her apartment emptied. No forwarding address. He'd told himself she was weak for not trusting him. He'd told himself she'd wanted an excuse to leave, that maybe she'd never loved him the way he'd loved her. He'd built a fortress out of those lies because the alternative, that he'd failed her, that she'd left carrying pieces of their life he didn't know existed, was unbearable. Now, standing in his empty office with Manhattan spread out below him like a kingdom that meant nothing, Adrian Cole faced a truth he couldn't ignore. Elena had been pregnant when she left. She'd carried his child alone, through 9 months of doubt and pain and whatever hell she'd endured without him. And she'd named him anyway. After everything, she'd still written his name on that birth certificate. He grabbed his coat. Within 20 minutes, his helicopter was airborne, cutting through the snowstorm toward a coastal town he'd never heard of. Willow Haven. It sounded like something from a storybook, soft and safe and completely unlike the sharp edges of the world Adrian inhabited. He stared out at the darkness below, at the scattered lights of small towns that would never understand what it meant to build an empire or lose one. His hands were shaking. Adrian Cole, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who'd fired executives with a single sentence, couldn't stop his hands from shaking. The helicopter landed on the hospital's roof just after midnight. Dr. Lynn met him, a small woman with steady eyes and the kind of exhaustion that came from saving lives. She led him through sterile hallways that smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings, past rooms where other families were forming, other stories were starting. Adrian felt like an intruder. This wasn't his world. He dealt in concrete and steel, not the fragile warmth of hospital nurseries. "She's in room 304, Dr. Lynn said, stopping in front of a large window. Behind it, rows of tiny bassinets held sleeping infants, each one a universe unto itself. But first, I thought you might want to see your daughter. Your daughter. The words should have felt foreign. Instead, they fit into a space Adrian hadn't known was empty, like a key finding its lock after years of searching. Dr. Lin pointed to a bassinet in the second row. The baby was impossibly small, wrapped in a pink blanket, her face scrunched in sleep. Dark hair, lots of it, curling slightly at the edges. Adrian moved closer to the glass, his breath fogging it. The baby's hand emerged from the blanket, fingers spreading and closing, reaching for something that wasn't there. She looks like you, Dr. Lin said softly. Elena said she has your stubborn chin. Adrian couldn't speak. He pressed his palm against the glass, and for a moment, just a moment, the baby's hand seemed to reach toward his, separated by nothing but the thin barrier between them. Something in his chest broke open, some dam he'd built to keep the grief out, and suddenly he was drowning in it. All the months of telling himself he was fine, that the divorce was for the best, that Elena had made her choice, it was all ash now, blown away by the reality of this tiny person who shared his DNA, who existed because of a love he thought was dead. "Where's Elena?" he managed. Dr. Lin's expression shifted, professional warmth giving way to concern. "Room 304. But Mr. Cole, you should know, she lost a lot of blood during delivery. She's weak. Don't upset her. Don't upset her." As if he could do anything else. As if his very presence wasn't an earthquake in whatever fragile peace Elena had managed to build without him. The door to room 304 was partially open. Adrian stood outside it for a full minute, listening to the steady beep of monitors, the whisper of machinery keeping watch over the woman he'd once promised to protect. He'd failed that promise. The evidence was in the pale exhaustion he knew he'd find on her face, in the 9 months she'd survived without him, in the baby down the hall who should have been surrounded by both parents from the moment of conception. He pushed the door open. Elena was asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. She'd always been beautiful, but now there was something else, a depth to her features that came from endurance, from walking through fire alone. The monitors cast blue light across her face. Her hand rested on her stomach, empty now, and Adrian remembered the night she'd done the same thing in their bed, whispering about someday. They'd had everything then. How had someday come and gone without him? Her eyes opened. For a moment, they were unfocused, still caught in whatever dream had held her. Then they found him, and everything sharpened. Fear flashed first, then anger, then something that looked dangerously like hope before she locked it away. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but it carried all the weight of their history. Adrian stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You put my name on the birth certificate. Because it's yours, Adrian." She tried to sit up, grimaced with pain, and he was moving before he could think, his hand steadying her, adjusting pillows. She flinched from his touch, and that small recoil hurt more than any of the words they'd thrown at each other the night she left. "She's yours. Don't touch me." He stepped back, hands raised. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena laughed, and it was the saddest sound he'd ever heard. "Tell you? Tell you what? That I was pregnant while you were busy with Victoria Chen? That I was carrying your child while the entire city watched you two play house for the cameras? That was a setup. Mason proved it. The photo was. I know." Her words cut through his defense like a blade. "I know it was fake. I've known for 4 months." The room tilted. Adrian gripped the back of the chair beside her bed, trying to find his balance in a world that kept shifting beneath him. "You knew? Then why didn't you come back? Why didn't you?" "Because by the time I found out the truth, I'd already realized something else." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "You didn't come after me, Adrian. Not really. You sent Mason with evidence and lawyers and logic, but you never came yourself. You never got on a plane or showed up at my door or fought for us the way you fight for everything else in your life. So I stayed away. I figured if you couldn't fight for your wife, you damn sure wouldn't fight for a baby you didn't know existed. The truth of it was a hammer to his chest. She was right. He'd been so caught up in his wounded pride and the injustice of being falsely accused that he'd let Mason handle the aftermath. He'd convinced himself that if Elena truly loved him, she'd have trusted him, would have stayed. He'd made her distrust his problem to solve while he buried himself in work and proving he didn't need her and becoming the cold corporate machine everyone expected him to be. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, like bringing a candle to fight the darkness. Elena, I'm so sorry. I should have come. I should have torn this world apart to find you. But you didn't. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, and he could see how exhausted she was, how this conversation was draining what little strength she had left. You let me go. So why are you here now? Guilt? Obligation? Some billionaire savior complex? I'm here because Adrian stopped. Because why? Because a doctor had called? Because he'd seen his daughter's face and felt the ground shift beneath his empire? Because standing in that empty penthouse, he'd finally understood that Elena hadn't taken everything when she left, she'd left him with everything, and it had all turned to dust without her? I'm here because I was wrong, he said finally. About all of it. I thought you left because you didn't trust me, didn't love me enough. I made it about my pain, my betrayal. I never stopped to think about how scared you must have been, how alone. I never asked myself what I'd done to make you feel like you couldn't come to me, couldn't trust that I'd believe you over a photograph. I failed you, Elena. Long before that picture, I'd already failed you by making our marriage about my schedule, my company, my priorities. And when you needed me most, I did exactly what you expected. I sent lawyers instead of showing up myself. The monitors beeped in the silence between them. Elena stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the angle, for whatever manipulation she expected. Adrian let her look. He had nothing left to hide behind, no walls left to maintain. She'd seen him at his worst. Maybe it was time to let her see him broken too. She has your eyes, Elena whispered. I knew the moment she was born. Same storm gray color, same intensity. She looks at me like she's trying to figure out the world, just like you used to look at everything. Can I see her again? Adrian asked. Not through the glass. Can I hold her? Elena's expression softened, just slightly, like ice beginning to thaw. The nurse said tomorrow, if I'm stronger. They want to make sure I can supervise. She's so tiny, Adrian. 3 weeks early. I was so scared, her voice broke, and suddenly she was crying, really crying, all the fear and exhaustion and loneliness of 9 months crashing down at once. This time, when Adrian moved to her bedside, she didn't flinch away. He took her hand carefully, like she was made of glass, and she gripped his fingers with surprising strength. You weren't alone, he said, even though they both knew it was a lie. You're not alone now. I know I have no right to ask, no right to be here, but Elena, let me stay. Let me prove that I can be the man you needed 6 months ago. Elena pulled her hand away slowly, deliberately. The loss of her touch felt like winter returning to his bones. Prove it how? By writing a check? By setting us up in some penthouse where you visit twice a month between board meetings? I don't need your money, Adrian. I never did. Then what do you need? The question hung in the air, raw and genuine. Elena stared at him, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, he saw past the anger to the exhaustion beneath. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her skin had a pallor that spoke of more than just childbirth. This woman had been through hell, and he hadn't been there to catch her when she fell. I need you to leave, she said finally. I need you to go back to New York and your empire and let us have peace. That's what I need. But Adrian saw the lie in her eyes. He'd spent 5 years learning to read her, to understand the way her walls went up when she was most vulnerable. She didn't want him to leave. She wanted him to fight for the right to stay. So he sat down in the chair beside her bed. No. Excuse me? I said no. You can throw me out, call security, have them drag me away. But I'm not leaving. Not again. Not when my daughter is down that hallway and the woman I never stopped loving is telling me she needs me to abandon them both. Elena's eyes flashed. Don't you dare make this romantic. Don't turn this into some grand gesture when. I'm not going back to New York, Adrian interrupted. I'm not going back to Cole Industries. Mason called me 3 times on the helicopter ride here, telling me the board is voting on my removal if I don't return. Let them vote. Let them have it all. Because none of it matters if I'm not the kind of man who shows up when it counts. The words felt like shedding skin, like stepping out of a costume he'd worn for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't actually him. The billionaire CEO, the corporate shark, the man who valued control above connection, that person had built an empire on sand. One phone call, and it had all washed away, revealing the truth underneath. He was just a man who'd loved a woman and lost her, and maybe, there was a chance to find his way back. You don't mean that, Elena said, but her voice wavered. Your company is everything to you. It was, Adrian admitted. Until I realized my daughter won't remember board meetings or stock prices. She'll remember whether her father was there. Whether he chose her. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, closing the distance between them without touching. I'm choosing you both. However long it takes, whatever I have to do. I'm staying. The machines beat their steady rhythm. Outside the room, footsteps passed in the hallway, nurses making rounds, other families navigating their own crises and celebrations. Elena watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read, hope and fear tangled together, fighting for dominance. You can't just upend your entire life, she whispered. Watch me. And he meant it. In that moment, sitting in a hospital room in a town he'd never heard of 6 hours ago, Adrian Cole made a decision that would have seemed insane to the man he'd been yesterday. But that man had been living a half-life, mistaking motion for meaning, confusing success with satisfaction. The real measure of his life was right here, in this room, down that hallway, and the possibility of becoming someone worth believing in. Dr. Lin knocked softly before entering. I'm sorry to interrupt, but visiting hours are over. Mr. Cole, there's a hotel 3 blocks from here if you need. I'm staying, Adrian said. Dr. Lin glanced at Elena, who looked away. The chair converts to a bed, the doctor said carefully. But Elena needs rest. Real rest. I understand. After Dr. Lin left, silence settled over the room again. Elena shifted uncomfortably, wincing. There's a cottage, she said finally, not looking at him. 3 blocks north of Main Street. Blue door, white trim. The landlord is Mrs. Chen, no relation to Victoria, she added with the ghost of a smile. Tell her I sent you. She'll have a key. Thank you. Don't thank me. I just don't want you sleeping in a chair all night, making me feel guilty. Adrian stood, gathering his coat. At the door, he paused. Elena? What's her name? Our daughter. For the first time since he'd arrived, Elena's expression softened completely, all defenses dropping away. Aria. I named her Aria because I wanted her to have music in her life, even when everything else felt silent. Aria, Adrian repeated, tasting the name, feeling it settle into his heart. It's perfect. Adrian? Elena's voice stopped him again. The truth about the photo, about Marcus Reeves setting everything up, when did you find out? 3 weeks after you left. Mason had the proof a month after that. And you didn't come. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. No. I didn't come. I told myself you should come to me, that you owed me an apology. I was wrong. I was prideful and stupid and wrong. Elena nodded slowly. At least you're honest now. He left before she could see the tears in his eyes, before she could witness just how completely her absence had broken him. The hospital corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Through the nursery window, he could see Aria sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. His daughter. His second chance. His reason to become the man he should have been all along. The next morning, Adrian woke in the cottage to find snow covering Willow Haven like a fresh start. He bought coffee from a local shop where everyone seemed to know everyone, where the barista called him honey and asked if he was visiting family. He almost said no, then corrected himself. Yes. My daughter was just born. The words felt foreign and right at the same time. At the hospital, a nurse led him to Elena's room with Aria bundled in her arms. 10 minutes, the nurse said firmly. And wash your hands first. Adrian scrubbed his hands until they were raw. The nurse placed Aria in his arms, adjusting his grip, showing him how to support her head. She weighed nothing, and everything. Every deal he'd ever closed, every building he'd ever built, every achievement he'd ever claimed suddenly felt weightless compared to this 6-pound person staring up at him with storm gray eyes. "Hi, Aria," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I know I'm late. I'm so sorry I'm late. But I'm here now, and I promise," his voice broke. "I promise I'm not going anywhere." Elena watched from the bed, and when he looked up, he saw tears streaming down her face. Not angry tears this time. Something softer, something that looked like the woman he'd married in a courthouse on a rainy Tuesday because they couldn't wait another day to belong to each other. "She likes you," Elena said quietly. "I like her too." Adrian smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile in 6 months. "I think I might love her more than anything I've ever loved in my life." "Even your company?" "Especially my company." That afternoon, Mason called with news. The board had voted. Adrian was out. Cole Industries would continue under new leadership. Stock prices had already dipped. Investors were nervous. Everything Adrian had built was fracturing without him. "Do you want to fight this?" Mason asked. Adrian looked at Aria sleeping in the bassinet beside Elena's bed, at Elena resting with her hand on their daughter's blanket. "No," he said. "Let it go. All of it." 3 weeks later, Adrian signed the papers that transferred his company to new ownership. He kept enough to ensure Aria's future, to make sure Elena never had to worry about money again. The rest, the empire, the reputation, the identity he'd built, he let it all dissolve like snow in spring rain. He rented the cottage permanently. He learned to change diapers at 2 in the morning. He discovered that Willow Haven had a community theater, a farmer's market, a life that existed outside conference rooms and stock tickers. He sat with Elena on her porch, not pushing, not demanding, just being present while she healed and learned to trust again. And slowly, like ice thawing, she softened toward him. One night, holding Aria while Elena cooked dinner, her first time out of bed for more than a few minutes, she looked at him and said, "You're different." "I'm trying to be." "No," Elena corrected. "You are. Different. Better. The Adrian I married would never have walked away from his company. The Adrian you married was an idiot who didn't know what mattered." 6 months after that phone call that changed everything, Adrian proposed again. Not with a diamond or a grand gesture, but with a simple question asked while Aria slept between them on the couch, her tiny snores filling the cottage with sound. "Can I come home?" Elena looked at him for a long time, searching his face for the truth, for the promise, for the man he'd become in the ruins of who he'd been. "You are home," she said finally. "You've been home since the moment you decided to stay." They were married on the beach at sunset, with Aria in Elena's arms and Mrs. Chen as their only witness. No press, no spectacle, no empire watching. Just 2 people who'd lost each other finding their way back, and a baby girl who'd be raised knowing that the most important thing her father ever built wasn't made of steel and glass. It was made of love and second chances and the courage to choose what mattered most. Adrian Cole had been a billionaire. Now he was something better. He was a father. A husband. A man who'd learned that the only wealth worth having was the kind you could hold in your arms at 2 in the morning when the rest of the world was sleeping. And he'd never been richer in his life. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, because sometimes the best stories are the ones about finding your way home. Drop a comment below. Would you have forgiven Adrian? And don't forget to like this video if you believe in second chances. More stories coming soon.